I'm Jennifer Kennedy, I'm an attorney, and we've met before. When last I spoke to you, it was May of 2022, a year and a half ago, and I'll get to that in a minute. Today I'm here to urge the long overdue sunsetting of your COVID vaccination mandate, but it doesn't go far enough. You need to reinstate all employees with full back pay. Listen, this didn't hit me, but it injured my friends. You stole livelihoods and careers from dedicated employees. You took food off the table and medical care away from children. You siphoned birthday gifts and you sucked Christmas presents up the chimney. In the name of health, you demanded that employees submit to an irreversible invasive EUA injection, a medical procedure with documented risks like blood clots, myocarditis, stroke, and death. In the name of safety, you demanded submission to this shot that never did, never could, and still does not prevent infection with or transmission of SARS-CoV-2. And the people you fired, they couldn't even get unemployment, and without medical care, they couldn't even get therapy to deal with the clinical depression you plunged them into. And by the way, so why now? Was it because of the embarrassing arguments in the Ninth Circuit that we just heard? Thank God they played that video. And the justices who said they were shocked that you were still pushing this mandate. And by the way, it's so interesting in the little report that you wrote, which counsel mentioned in those Ninth Circuit arguments, where the most scurrilous and reprehensible lie I've ever heard. And that lie is this: the district mandated but did not enforce a student vaccination requirement. How dare you? How dare you gaslight us into believing that you didn't crush students in the fall of 2021, that you didn't spend $5 million on your Safe Steps campaign of bullying, bribing, harassment, and shaming to force parents to subject their children to this experimental vaccine. How dare you say none of that happened, that you didn't kick kids off their sports, out of their clubs, out of chess, out of cheer, out of fall sports, everything that you did in October of 2021, you absolutely enforced that mandate. And funny also in the report, the fact that you say this now applies to all authorized charter schools. Funny because in May of 2022, that's what I was telling you. You needed to control your rogue charter, your LA authorized charter sitting on LAUSD property. Of course, I'm referring to Granada Hills Charter, which did crush students, which did put students off campus, bar them from campus, and deny them every possible part of campus activity, including the seniors, denying them senior awards night and even their graduation. I was here in May of 22 at your fancy end of the year board retreat. I begged you to do something to stop it and save their graduation, and to a man, not a one of you did anything. Today is the day to finally do something, and that is end your stupid and cruel vaccine mandate. Thank you. Good afternoon.
So you can see why I had to show that video, because she's amazing. This is one of our lawyers, Jennifer Kennedy. She's a freedom lawyer who's fighting for compensatory damages for the teachers who've lost their jobs or lost wages. And I've spoken in front of that board. And again, you got to be bold. You got to stand up for your rights. And I just want to say one last thing. She's been displaced because of the Altadena fires. She has over $50,000 worth of smoke damage. So she needs to go back to, she's in between hotels, so she needs to leave as soon as she speaks. She came despite all of that. So can we please welcome Jennifer Kennedy?
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you guys very much. I have to say that still remains, that was in 2023, September 26th, the day that LA Unified finally voted to take down that employee mandate. And that clearly still stands as the 3 most satisfying minutes of my life, maybe to date. With the exception of births of my children, we'll make those most satisfying. I'm here to tell you about the legal landscape of where we are when we talk about reclaiming education and we talk about supporting our teachers. The way I can do it is by supporting our teachers legally who were affected by these ridiculous, stupid, and cruel vaccine mandates. And my case that I have right now is I have at least 120 of the educators, counselors, and other district employees of every kind who were put off work, who were terminated under the ridiculous district mandate, and they were put through so much injury, harm, deprivation, from lost income all the way down to displacement. And I can tell you, as now having been displaced by the fire, and luckily my home is still standing, but we've not been in it since January 7th, I can tell you how difficult it is to have to move from place to place, temporary housing, sit with friends, go to hotels, et cetera. It's very difficult, and yet we're super lucky, and all I think of is how difficult it must have been for those teachers who lost their jobs, lost their income, and lost their homes, lost their ability to stay in their apartment or afford their home, had to leave the state, for example. And at that time, where's the sympathy also? One of the cases I have, another case is my Washington firefighters up in Washington, obviously. That's going to be my next most exciting minutes of speaking, and that's going to be 15 minutes on April 3rd up in Portland. I'm going to be arguing in the Ninth Circuit on behalf. Yep. It's going to be, you guys, I need your prayers and your support. This is my first appeal, and it will be my first appearance in front of the Ninth Circuit, and we are going to create new law for employees in the vaccine mandate context, which is you cannot pretend that the existence of COVID and the existence of SARS-CoV-2, the virus, is the burden that a single employee must bear to protect the rest of the world. We are going to see in my argument that that's not enough, especially for religious employees in the workplace who are required to be accommodated for their religious conflict with receiving that COVID vaccination. So that's coming up, and I just want to say, off on that topic, these are the ways that we support employees as well as these teachers, is by, number one, defending their rights in the workplace, making the perpetrators of these mandates accountable for what they did to damage these people. I was hoping I was going to come after Leslie Manookian because she's going to tell you about her extremely groundbreaking case that is so exciting in the legal world and what it has done to set the stage for this kind of justice. Leslie brought her case when it was seeking declaratory relief and injunctive relief. Basically, declare this mandate unconstitutional and stop it. My case, because the courts didn't cooperate, no judge was cooperating in 2021, because they didn't cooperate and they didn't stop the policy, and in fact, they dismissed cases like this. That's why it went forward and it injured so many people. That's my case. We come in on the back end and say, you're responsible for the damage. All of that preventable damage that didn't have to happen, and you did it on purpose, and you inflicted it intentionally on these innocent, hardworking employees who were no threat to anybody, and certainly no threat other than a vaccinated person whom we know can also get and transmit that same virus. So mine's for damages, but Leslie's case has set this amazing precedent that is going to really continue to help and continue to reverberate, God willing, in all the decisions to come. So I want you to know, from a legal standpoint, we are out there fighting. We are going to make new law in this area, and we're going to help support these teachers who were so damaged by LA Unified and really across this state and across our nation. I also want to say we've got other litigation going that is going to help the education community. Remember, we saw that thing about AB 1266. That was the law that was mentioned on Rebecca's slide, allowing, and we call it the Sports and Bathrooms Bill, allowing the boys into the girls' teams and sports. It's really allowing the opposite gender onto sports and bathrooms, regardless of their biological sex. That right now is being challenged in court, and that's going to fall as well. So I want you to know we've got people on every different front that are attacking these things that are really attacking our values and our way of life, and our teachers, our kids, our families, and everything we hold dear. We've got some cavalry out there on the legal side of things, so I want you to remain confident. I feel like I might have gone over my time, but thank you all for being here and for the support. And again, speaking of support, thank you for being here, number one, taking the time actually to be here and learn how you can support these efforts. And also, please support litigation, because much of it has been done pro bono. We can't all do pro bono forever. Litigation is very expensive, and it takes trained attorneys and a lot of hours. And that's another way that you can really help push these issues forward, is if you actually write a check, because you then are paying the attorney to do that work, to make sure we're taking those steps towards the goals we all really share. Thank you very much, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Patriots. I'm Vanessa Vance, and this is Sonny Lloyd. We are high school teachers for LA Unified School District. We are also the founders of California Educators for Medical Freedom. We are two among hundreds of LAUSD employees who declined the COVID shot. We got kicked out of school, lost our positions for not taking it. In case you didn't know, our district had one of the strictest mandates in the nation. Even though LAUSD accepted our religious exemptions, we were told that we were still defying district policy. The new policy was no unvaccinated employees were allowed on district property, period, even with an exemption. They claimed that their policy was for the health and safety of everyone on campus. When we pressured Superintendent Carvalho about how it makes sense that the employees have a mandate but the students don't, he said something to the effect of, well, we can require it for the employees but not the students because we pay you. We fought back and said, but we already have the strictest safety measures in place. Number one, every morning we have to complete the daily symptom checker, a Microsoft app called the Daily Pass, to be allowed on campus. Number two, we have to COVID test every single week during our lunch break. And number three, masks are required at all times. This is unreasonable and discriminatory that unvaccinated employees are losing their jobs. Of course, LAUSD did not budge on its policy. And clearly, this mandate was something more than about health and safety. In my opinion, it was about power, control, and money. When the mandate went into effect in October of 2021, approximately 1,000 workers, teachers, carpenters, school psychologists, principals, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, electricians, custodians, etc., lost their jobs. Luckily for me and Sonny, since we were teachers, we were transferred to work from home positions at the district's online academy. However, hundreds of teachers lost their employment completely, and some were forced to retire early because there were just no positions for them at the online academy. The suffering and loss has been tremendous. But Sonny and I were willing to lose our jobs over this. After over 20 years of service in LAUSD, as many of us were. When the previous superintendent of LAUSD was in the news during the lockdown, declaring that no one would return to campus without this vaccine, we knew that we were in a serious dilemma. No way were we going to allow ourselves to be injected with an experimental, DNA-altering big pharma product. At that time, I was a member of our union, UTLA. So I went on our union's Facebook group to try to find others with views similar to my own. And fortunately, I found Sonny, I found Heather, and many others who are here today. We decided to form a group to fight against this, and 4 years later, here we are. We're still fighting. Our group has grown into the hundreds, and we've supported countless employees through the years. By the way, our union never did anything to help us. I call them the United Traders of Los Angeles. We have multiple lawsuits in the works to make right the injustice we've suffered. Our biggest lawsuit against LAUSD is what we call the HFDF, or Health Freedom Defense Fund lawsuit. It's huge. Our main argument is that this COVID shot was not a vaccine because it didn't stop infection or transmission. So at best, it was a medical treatment, and per the law, medical treatments cannot be mandated. When we win, this will be a major victory, not just for LAUSD employees, but for the bodily autonomy of every single American. It will set a monumental legal precedent, and our case will be referred to in future textbooks. Health Freedom Defense Fund is an incredible organization with the most brilliant legal team that we have been blessed to partner with in this fight. HFDF's mission rests on the foundational principle that bodily autonomy is the most sacred and precious of human rights and must be fervently guarded. I encourage everyone to check out their website, healthfreedomdefense.org, to see all the work they've been doing around the country. Thank you to everyone who has generously donated or will donate to our case. We've raised a lot of money for our legal fees, but we still need to raise a lot more, especially since it looks like our case will end up in the Supreme Court. The president and founder of Health Freedom Defense Fund, Leslie Manookian, has flown in from out of town to speak to us today. It is with great pleasure and honor to introduce you to this compassionate, intelligent, and highly accomplished warrior for humanity, Leslie Manookian.
I'm going to have to stop coming to these because every time I do, Vanessa makes me cry. We all know, everyone in this room knows that we are literally facing the fight of our lives. Because if we don't have the right to decide what we put into and onto our bodies from a medical standpoint, then what rights do we have? I care not if I have freedom of speech if I can't control my body. It's meaningless. I'm a slave. I'm nothing more than a cow or a pig that someone can vaccinate or brand or whatever. And that's why we do what we do, because that is the most sacred right that we can possibly have. And I believe that that is something that our Creator gives each and every one of us by birth. Just last Wednesday, I actually presented a bill that an Idaho state senator sponsored for me, and it's called the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, and it would prohibit almost all medical mandates in the state of Idaho. I addressed the legislature, the Committee on State Affairs in the Senate, and explained to them that it's really preposterous that I even had to be there talking to them about this. Like, how far have we veered from our fundamental principles? How far have we gotten to a place where we don't recognize or acknowledge that what we inject into our bodies or are forced to put on our bodies that alter our biological functioning, like masks, are an intrusion and are forced medicine or coercion, that this cannot be allowed in a fair and just and free society. It's just shocking that we are even here today, but we are. And I actually believe that it is darkest before the dawn, and that this is all happening because we are going to be able to reassert our God-given rights once and for all. So I want to talk a little bit about the work of Health Freedom Defense Fund, and then specifically about the case. a couple of months ago, Health Freedom Defense Fund sued the government again, the federal government, something we've done now, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 times. Because you know why? Because the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services is still requiring green card applicants to get the COVID shot. They are. And here's the thing. CDC is only authorized by Congress to put shots on the schedule that are known to address a vaccine-preventable disease. Is COVID vaccine preventable? So how can they put it on the list? They can't. They know it's illegal. We know it's illegal. They've just been doing it until somebody sued them. So HFDF did. We have been contacted by numerous individuals. I don't know how many dozens of individuals, and those are just the ones who know about the case, who are the lead named plaintiff, Benjamin Collins, and his wife, Bing Yu. They live in Japan. She's of Chinese descent. They've been married for years, and they want to come home. And they can't because she doesn't want to get the COVID shot. And that's the only reason they keep denying her green card. That's it. There's another family that we have. The father, he's from New Zealand. He is stuck in New Zealand while his children and wife have come home to the United States. His kids cry every day for their dad, who is literally separated from his family for literally the stupidity of, the stupid requirement that he's supposed to get this shot. That's the only reason. Talk about arbitrary and capricious. There are 60 million tourists that come to America every year. And how many people have gotten the COVID shot in the last year or so? About 20% of Americans, which means 80% haven't. And that 80% are unvaccinated and therefore unprotected from COVID, if it ever protected them in the first place. We all know it didn't. The point is, nobody's vaccinated, basically, and yet these families are being separated. And the whole reason that this persists is because the government just thinks, you know what, we'll just do what we want because the onus is on them to actually file a lawsuit, raise the funds, find the attorneys and everything that they need, and it's not going to happen. And the average attorney isn't skilled going into federal court, so you need people who know how to go up against the Department of Justice. So that's what we do. So this case is really important because it is going to definitively prove that the COVID shots do not stop transmission or infection. We want the judge to rule on that, number one. And number two, we want the judge to actually affirm what we all know to be true because it's written in the Federal Code of Regulations, which is that CDC cannot add shots to the schedule for anything that's not a vaccine-preventable disease. This will open the door for us, everyone, because you know why? Other vaccines don't actually stop transmission or spread. So we're being very, very strategic about taking on the COVID shot to open the door to the rest of the program. So that's one angle to try and undermine the credibility, the authority, and everything surrounding the whole vaccine program in this country. Now let's talk about this case. So last week we got some disconcerting news. Wednesday afternoon, I think I was in an interview or something, and I see a text come in from our attorney saying that the en banc review had been granted. Now let me explain what this means and why we actually think it's an opportunity. So last time I was here was in June of last year, and it was literally a week or maybe 10 days, 8-9 days after we had heard that we had won our appeal, which was one of the greatest days of my life for sure. This was just literally last Wednesday, so what is that, 3-4 days ago. I want to just backtrack and then explain what's going on with this. And what we didn't actually, while we won the appeal, where we fell short in terms of the actual opinion that was released and what we really want to see the court do. So remember that the first case, am I too close to this mic? Is there a weird echo or is it okay? So remember the very first case we filed, I think it was March 18th or 19th, somewhere around there, March 20th of 2021, when the school district started sending out messages to all of you guys that they were going to mandate the emergency use authorized COVID shot for all employees. And a bunch of people reached out to me, Vanessa, and we started talking about challenging it because it was very clear to us that the government, under the PrEP Act and in the Federal Code of Regulations, it's very explicit that no emergency use authorized product may be mandated. That's just the way the law is written. Now, the Department of Justice tried to twist that, literally, mental gymnastics, tried to twist that to mean that you had to be apprised of the risks of not taking the shot. Not that it was a health issue, but that it could potentially mean losing your job. Literally, talk about making stuff out of thin air, but this is what they did. The Department of Justice issued, I think it was from the Office of Legal Counsel, they issued an opinion saying that they could actually, that you had to just be apprised of what the risks to your job and your livelihood were, not the health impacts of it, which is just a total distortion of the law, but that's what happened. So we filed, the school district the day after we filed said, you know, you can test, wasn't really it was more of a recommendation. They backtracked. And then in July of 2021, as our case worked its way through the courts, they told the court that they did not ever intend to mandate the shot, that they weren't working on a mandate or anything like that. And so you know what? The court dismissed the case and said, you know, they're not mandating it, all's good, no harm, no foul, you know, let's all go on our merry ways. 17 days later, the school district implemented their actual mandate, claiming that the shot was now no longer EUA. We all should know that the shot is still only EUA. It's not properly licensed. We sued again, and the case was again dismissed by the same judge down here, Judge Dale Fisher. And she said that she was dismissing the case because of Jacobson. Jacobson is the lawsuit from 1905 that went to the Supreme Court, and upon which every vaccine has been mandated essentially in this country for the last 120 years. But Jacobson doesn't say that the state can just mandate any shot it wants. In fact, Jacobson said that the state could only mandate something, and it wasn't the whole state, it was one little region, not nationally, not an entire school district, not a whole state, nothing like that, in extremely narrow circumstances like a smallpox outbreak, with a shot that was known to be safe and effective. Now, I don't believe that the smallpox vaccine in 1905 was safe or effective, but let's leave that aside for the moment, okay? The truth is, it wasn't, but I'm gonna leave that aside. The judges were very clear from the Supreme Court that this authority in Jacobson should not be construed to grant broad authority to any kind of state actor, that it had to be extremely serious, a true emergency, and that it had to be narrowly applied. But it's now been used nationwide. It's been used for all these mandates, especially in the last 5 years. In fact, it's been used by Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz to say that the state can take you to the doctor and plunge a needle into your arm. How's that for freedom in America? Crazy, absolutely. And he went to Harvard or teaches there. Shows you what's happening. So this is clearly sheer lunacy. So what we argued in our case was that the shots don't stop transmission or infection, and therefore must be treated as a private medical therapeutic, a private decision, that natural immunity is real, that the Jacobson, this lawsuit from 1905, does not apply. In fact, there's a bucket of, which I will go through in a second, of more recent Supreme Court jurisprudence that states very, very clearly that we all have a liberty interest in refusing unwanted medical interventions, and that is a tried, cherished fundamental of American constitutional order. the case, so we argued natural immunity, that it doesn't stop transmission or infection, that Jacobson doesn't apply, and very importantly, that Jacobson must be reconciled with more recent jurisprudence. Now here's what's really important. So we won the appeal in June of last year, and the judges wrote that we have a liberty interest in refusing unwanted medical intervention. They also ruled that Jacobson had been misapplied, but they didn't talk about something called substantive due process. So the 14th Amendment, everybody should know, the 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War in order to ensure that all Black Americans had all the rights of everybody else in the country. And in there, there's a clause that says that that everyone has equal protection under the law and that they have the right to due process, meaning that whenever there's any kind of attempt by government to infringe their rights, they can appeal to a court and be granted due process. And there are a variety of types of due process, but I'm only going to talk about substantive due process, because substantive due process is what we're arguing. We're arguing that the only way that the government can force you to essentially surrender your liberty is if they have an extreme emergency and an extreme situation that warrants it. I would argue that there is no situation that warrants forcing us to put anything into our bodies. But the big thing is that when substantive due process is in question, then the government is required to overcome something called strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny is a much higher level or a higher threshold for them to be able to prove that they have any reason to do what they want to do. For just equal protection, it's only something called rational basis, which means does the government have a rational reason to do something? So clearly, if the government, the school district, a state, an entity, an arm of the government, wants to force you to take an experimental deadly shot, it better have a darn good reason for doing so. And clearly they don't. Because number one, the shots don't stop transmission or infection. Number two, natural immunity is real. And number three, and most importantly, all the more recent lawsuits in the last 50 or 60 years come down on our side. They come down on the side of liberty. They come down on the side of bodily autonomy. And they are perfectly clear that the government cannot intrude into your body ever, even for good reasons. So this is a case from 1952, actually. It's called Roshan versus California. And this case is truly extraordinary. It involved someone who was arrested, and they swallowed the evidence to keep the police from getting the evidence. And you know what the court ruled? That the government can't pump your stomach because it's a violation, an unreasonable and an inappropriate violation of your liberty to pump your stomach in order to get to that. Well, if they can't pump your stomach, how can they force you to risk your life? How can they force you to put something into your body that has the potential of altering your genes? How is it that they can expose you to myocarditis and to rheumatoid arthritis and seizures and potential sterility and all of the other things, blood clots and all these things that we know happen as a result of those shots? The simple truth is they can't, and no reasonable judge would argue that they can. Griswold versus Connecticut was in 1965. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that we all have a zone of privacy around us and that the state can't intrude into that. And then in the 1990s, we had a whole slew of other cases. There was Cruzon versus Director, which says that you have the right to refuse unwanted medical treatment, even if it might save your life. In Washington versus Harper in 1990 as well, the Supreme Court said that prisoners, people literally in prison, have the right to refuse psychiatric medications, unwanted medical interventions, that they cannot be forced unless they pose a threat to themselves or those around them. It is eminently clear that the tide has shifted in this country. We are moving in the right direction. So what happened last week was we got this message, an order from the court saying that en banc review had been approved or granted. So let me just go back so everybody understands. We had oral argument in September of 2023, arguing that that the decision of the district court should be overturned because it was wrong, and that was granted in, I think it was June 7th of last year. Then in late June, the school district petitioned the court for an en banc review. So what happens is when you go to district court, you get one judge, and the case is heard by this one judge. And both cases were heard by the same judge, who dismissed both. So we appealed because we thought that that case, the second one in particular, was dead wrong. We drew 3 judges. It's random. You don't know who the judges are going to be that you're going to draw. And those judges issued their ruling last June 7th, June 7th of 2024. Then the school district, over the next couple of weeks, submitted what's called a petition to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, asking for a review of the ruling from the 3-judge panel. Now, our judges in that in the appeal, they said that the case was not moot because the school district had twice tried to manipulate the jurisdiction of the court by rescinding and then re-implementing and then reinstating and then re-implementing the mandate in order to evade judicial review. And they also said that Jacobson had been misapplied, but they didn't rule on the most important piece, which is substantive due process. This is the opportunity. So basically what happened was we heard last week that the school district's petition from last June or July requesting an en banc review meaning that a bigger panel of judges review the decision. That is going to go forward. That appeal or that petition was granted. Now, of course, I wish it would that didn't happen. I wish that we were going to be going to district court in order to prove our case, in order to call in our experts and prove to the court that these shots don't stop transmission or infection, that everybody knows that natural immunity is real, and all of the points that we've made. That would clearly be the best in some ways. But the thing is, we haven't gotten the really, really clear ruling that we need and want, that Jacobson needs to be put to bed forever. That it stems from an era in which we couldn't vote, women couldn't vote, in which the Supreme Court thought it was okay to sterilize women who they deemed to be too unintelligent to have children, and in an era that none of us want to go back to. And all of this more recent jurisprudence is much more, one, current with our culture today, clearly consistent with all of the foundational principles and the most basic of human rights that we all hold dear, and it needs to be changed. So we need the courts to uphold that all the more recent jurisprudence is actually what should be in place today. That is something that we can argue in front of the Ninth Circuit en banc. So basically what's going to happen is the week of March 17th, excuse me, the week of March 17th in San Francisco, I don't know the day yet, a panel of 13 judges of the Ninth Circuit are going to rehear oral argument in our case. So this is going to be very, very exciting. We don't have to submit any more briefs or anything like that. What's just going to happen is our attorneys will go and they will participate in oral argument and basically have the same kind of thing that happened in September of 2023. So there will be oral argument, but instead of in front of 3 judges, it's going to be in front of 13 judges. And we will be able to actually argue that the original panel missed the most important piece, which is that substantive due process must be granted to each and every one of us, each and every one of you, I should say, and that Jacobson needs to be rectified with the more recent jurisprudence. So like I said, I wish that it weren't happening because I think it would be easier just to go and prove to the court. And the thing is, you know, it's very different when you've got 13 judges who are peppering you with questions rather than going to a jury, which would have been ideal. But we now get to really argue this substantive due process portion of our case, the Jacobson portion, and hopefully we will win. If we don't win, as Vanessa said, we're off to the Supreme Court. Yes, come on. And the thing is, the reason that is so important is because the Ninth Circuit, if the Ninth Circuit upholds the decision that we had from the 3-judge panel, it will become the law in the entire Ninth Circuit. If it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says you have the right to substantive due process and Jacobson doesn't apply, it will be binding law on the entire country. That is what we want. So there's a part of me that's downhearted, and there's a part of me that is extremely encouraged. When I talked to Scott Street, our attorney, he said, you know, listen, our outcome was great from the original win on the appeal, but we didn't get the clarification that we really want in the law. And those judges are in a pickle, because if they find against us, how can they then tell people your body, your choice for other things? So we are super excited. I really, truly believe that God is with us and that we are in the process of making history. That's the only reason that I know Sonny and Vanessa and all of you stood up, because you know in your hearts what is right. And what is right is that you and you alone make your own health decisions. You and you alone have to live with the ramifications of your health choices. No bureaucrat, no school director, no school board, no superintendent, I don't care who they are, get to tell you how to live your life, how to keep yourself well, or what medical interventions you should undergo. And the fact that they have pretended or somehow assumed that they have that power and authority has to be stopped, and it's going to stop now. So I just want to say, you know, it is my unbelievable honor and pleasure to be with all of you, to stand with all of you, and to fight this fight. We are going to win. We are going to do anything and everything in our power to win. And we have truth, we have decency, we have human rights, and we have God on our side, and we are going to prevail. So on Wednesday morning, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will hopefully be confirmed by the entire United States Senate. He has given so much to fight for this. He has opened himself up to learning, changing his entrenched viewpoints, and now sacrificing himself. He's been doing that for years. He has been given so much grief, so much flack. It's incredible what that man has gone through. His own siblings and family members, cousins, attack him. So last week, I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before, the Finance Committee voted 14-13, the Senate Finance Committee, to send his nomination to the floor of the Senate. And that's going to happen on Wednesday. There have been some criticisms of Bobby in the last week or so, saying that he has made pledges that he shouldn't have, that he has compromised too much. But I can't think of anything more terrifying for a mainstream doctor like Senator Bill Cassidy than to be locked in a room with Bobby Kennedy, to be educated about the truth about vaccines. Now, Bobby is fully aware of our case. You know, it is recognized nationally as being one of the most important cases, if not perhaps the most important case with respect to Jacobson and substantive due process. And I know that those people in, in his camp and other health freedom leaders are really pulling for us. This case has the potential to really seriously change history, as I've said from the very beginning. And that is why we do what we do, and why I still, despite the fact that we lost this little, we have a speed bump here, that we are gonna still prevail. And I can't see how it could possibly be negative for us to have the president that we have, to have Bobby as head of HHS, and have the other nominees who've been put forward for agencies such as at NIH with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who happens to be one of the experts in our case, or Dr. Marty McCary, who has been put forward for FDA, or Dr. Bill Weldon, who is a former congressman as well, and who has been nominated to head up the CDC. So, our case is extremely important. We have support across the entire country. I hope anybody and everybody who has the means can. If you can give $10, please give $10. If you can give 1,000 or 10,000, then please do that. This thing has already cost a ton of money, as you can imagine, and we just keep fundraising so that we can keep going. Yeah, it's $500,000 we've spent on the case. And yes, we're a 501c3. Yeah, every donation is tax deductible. All of you guys have raised almost $200,000. The rest of it, Health Freedom Defense Fund has put up. And that excludes the first case. The first case was another 150-ish, I think, or something like that, that we paid for as well. So I really ask you to spread the word, talk to anybody and everybody that you can about the importance of this, because this isn't just about this case. This is about every single one of us and our God-given rights. That's what it's about. It's not about school teachers or electricians at LAUSD. It is about the most important human right that any of us can possess, and that is the ability to direct our own lives. Thank you.
Thank you. I just really wanted her to add that, because if RFK knows about our case, which means Trump knows about it through RFK, it's the most important case in the country, you guys, for bodily autonomy. If we don't win this, they can make us do whatever. So please, please be generous. Dave, can you put up the donation thing again? Please be generous. Please share this out regularly. We need several $1,000s more for our case, which is going to be for all Americans. Please buy the raffle tickets out in the foyer. Please, please be generous. If you know big donors, tell them about it. It's extremely important. So teachers, many of whom lost their jobs, and the rest don't make a ton of money, are the ones that raised that $200,000. So if we can sacrifice, please, please help us.